Hi, I'm Zuby, from Magic with Zuby, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network. Just like the show you're listening to now, the opinions expressed are those of each individual host. Check out all other podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to episode 88 of Better Podcasting. We've got a short episode this week since we both have prior commitments.
But don't worry, we haven't forgotten about you. We're going to run down the top 10 of our past year's episodes as voted by you.
And by voted by you, we mean according to the download stats. Stats.
Lauren, can we please start the show right now? Give SP some special time with his stats. Now, Lauren!
Welcome to Better Podcasting, a show where we talk about podcast tips, tools, and best practices to help you succeed with your podcast. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we podcast purely out of the love and fun of it. Podcasting is our hobby, and we recognize that it's yours too. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. Here's your host for the show, Stephen John Drew and Stargate Pioneer.
Welcome to episode 88 of Better Podcasting. I am Stephen John Drew, and with me is Stargate Pioneer.
Woohoo! It's Better Podcasting time. I am revved up and ready to go, Stephen. Let's get this sucker started. And by started, I mean talking about our contest that we have got going on right now. Yes, we are giving away for you one of the greatest, the best inventions for podcasting. It's an Audio-Technica ATR 2100 dynamic cardioid microphone. It has both USB and XLR, and it comes with a little stand, and it has the USB cord with it, so you can use it on the road, on the go, kind of like how Steven and I do. And oh, by the way, it might be a little poppy. It might have a little bit of plosives. It might have a little bit of proximity effect. So we have this foam windscreen. It's an on-stage windscreen from Amazon.com. It is for $2.95, and it is yours with the microphone if you tell us why did you start your podcast, or why do you want to start your podcast, and get that to us at contest@betterpodcasting.com. We'll take a written submission. We'll take an audio submission that you link Stephen to the file to. We'll prefer a video submission. This could be even taken by your phone, but we would love to see your smiling face as you're entered into the contest.
Yes, and entered into the contest. You don't just get it. You have to enter into the contest, and we will choose one lucky listener / viewer. The other thing that we want to just quickly remind everybody is that we are part of an awesome network called the Gonna Geek Network. And also on the Gonna Geek Network is the show called the official GonnaGeek.com show. And that's a show that SP and I do with somebody named Chris Farrell. And we have episode 200 coming up.
200. That is a lot of episodes. And you know what is fun about that, Stephen? You haven't been on the podcast for 200 times.
Nope, none of us have. We have all taken breaks because we're hobby podcasters, and that's what we do is we take breaks and let life take priority.
You know what's even better is that you have taken more breaks on there than Chris has.
Yeah, there's a spreadsheet with counts. We're close. But let's go ahead and roll into our topic. Here we go. You know, we may have said at the beginning of the show that we do have a shorter episode because of prior commitments, but this is actually something that we wanted to revisit anyway. So what better time than now? Because a lot of times people say to us, well, I like this episode, but I like this episode better. And a lot of times people say, well, I don't know. Do people like you talking about that? Or, you know, that was a little bit dry. And a lot of times they say that to me, Steven, just stop talking. Give SP his 70% time.
Or more.
But we are today going to run down a list of the top 10 episodes that we have done in the past year as according to the download numbers. So we're sorting it from, we'll go lowest to highest so that you start at the 10th place and work all the way up to the number one download of the past year. And we'll tell you a little bit about each of these shows so that if you haven't listened, you can go back and take a little bit of a listen and maybe scratch your head a little bit like, really, that made the top 10? And you can tell us all about why you think that it shouldn't have been on the top 10.
So these were shows that we published between May 1st, 2016 and April 30th, 2017 to give the latest shows at least 60 days to be competitive, but within a 1-year time period. So with that in mind, I'm going to start off, Stephen. Number 10, our 10th most favorited episode by our listeners is Better Podcasting episode 28. What is a hobby podcaster?
Oh, this episode was awesome because what we did is we ran through this question. It was at the time very relevant, and even so right now, very relevant. People are questioning, what is a hobby podcaster? And I'm not going to say that it was us that did it, but I'm just going to point out that once we started this podcast, that's when we all of a sudden started to hear the term hobby podcast thrown around. So it was us.
Totally us. Totally us. We'll go with that. And to this day, I hear different variations of what a hobby podcaster is. So if you would like to get to us what a hobby podcaster is in your mind, go ahead and contact us at contact@betterpodcasting.com. So number 9, our 9th most favorited episode by our listener is episode 26, Learning from Live.
Oh, we have done a few live shows. We got a couple of those under our belt. And in here, we talked all about how you want to best approach the live experience if you're going to go ahead and do a live show somewhere. Because yes, this is a follow-up to a certain panel that Stargate Pioneer did last year. And in this episode, we talked all about how he learned from this live experience. This time, it was not all about the live streaming, which, like I said, lots under our belt. But no, this was about in person, the real deal. And he did this year learn from live.
I did again learn from live, and I'll be learning again sometime soon. Stay tuned for an announcement on where SP is going to be later on this fall. The number 8th most downloaded episode was episode 43. How I Saved My Podcast.
This is when we launched this segment. This has been a fun recurring segment for us, How I Save My Podcast. We actually have some still in the hopper, and this is where we launched it, and we did a whole bunch, a big compilation of different podcasters and stories that they had and how they saved their podcast. This is something that I really encourage you to go back and take a listen to if you want to check this out, because there is a lot of really solid mistakes that people have made, but ways they've recovered, and it might just get your mind going on, oh, okay, yeah, next time that isn't a loss. I can actually recover that. So check that out. That was episode 43.
And number 7, our 7th most downloaded podcast in the past year is episode 68, Conducting Research, our Emily Prokop interview.
Now, this one's really fun to me because this is Emily Prokop. She was on the show a few weeks ago. She replaced me, rightfully so. And there is a lot of solid information in here if you are looking to do a research podcast or if you're just looking to speak on a subject. And check this out because Emily has the background for this. You should take her advice as gold and take a listen to episode 68.
Indeed, and you can find her podcast at thestorybehindpodcast.com. Number 6 most downloaded episode by our listeners was episode 50, SP's Golden Rules of Hobby Podcasting. This is actually my favorite podcast of the past year. I wish it was number 1. I'll take number 6.
You know what? It's because it was you and not me. If it was me, it'd be at number 1.
I see.
No, seriously, this is good though. This is something that SP went and for our 50th episode, he developed this golden list. And check this out because he went and he thought hard about this list. He developed it over the course of several months. And within that, he ended up narrowing it down to 10-ish golden rules. I think that was the term he used, 10-ish. And there was actually, I think, around 12, but the goal was about 10. And really good advice. And he gives reasons why he calls them his golden rules. And he breaks several of them and says don't break several of them.
Yeah, my favorite one from that is don't do more than 2 hobby podcasts per week. If you're a hobby podcaster, yeah, I broke that. Mm-hmm.
How many did you do?
Right now, I am doing 7 weekly podcasts. Can you believe that? Although 4 of them are doubles from 2 podcasts where we're trying to catch up, but man, it's killing me and I need to cut back.
Plus there is the one that it's called SP Podcast as he falls asleep. That one is just him talking as he falls asleep. So that's in there.
There might be snoring, but there is no talking. The number 5th most downloaded episode by our listener is episode number 64, From Hobbyist to Professional, an interview with Bandrew Scott from the Podcast Age YouTube channel.
So there you go, Bandrew. You made number 5. Kudos to you.
Indeed. And if you want excellent microphone reviews, go check out his channel. I know he thinks in terms of us as quality for podcasters. He does not recommend a condenser microphone for podcasters for the most part, just like we don't. So go check his stuff out.
That's the Podcastage YouTube channel. What do we got next?
The number 4th most downloaded episode within the past year by our listeners is episode number 39, Podcast Statistics.
This one here was really exciting for me because this was research that I did. I went and I put my podcast, the official GonnaGeek.com show, at Jeopardy, and I shuffled over the course of several different months and compared how the podcast statistics compared to each other. And how I did that was I used the service Blueberry as sort of control, and I compared it to Libsyn and Podbean. So you should check this out. This is episode 34 if you want to know how they compare, because there was variance when you consider Blueberry as the control.
I am all about statistics and varying statistics, and I could probably do those comparisons all day long, all night long, in my sleep. Yep, definitely statistics. Okay, let's move on. The number 3rd most downloaded episode by our listeners in the past year was episode 34, Distribution and Promotion, Part 3.
I'm just going to go ahead and say check out the full 3-part arc. Even though this was number 3, there's a lot of good things in this arc, and we did divvy it up into 3 different parts, obviously, since it's part 3, and we just talked about the whole process and things that come through with it. And there is a lot of steps that you forget about until you actually go and document them down. And in this we ended up running down a bunch of different ways that you want, or considerations you have when you're distributing and promoting your podcast. And I'll give SP the credit on this one. I believe this was his idea.
Might have been my idea, but you put a lot of work behind the scenes into that. So it's a team effort, man. Team effort. Okay, number 2, our second most downloaded episode in the past year by our listeners, episode 30, Microphones, Choosing and Using.
Wow, this one here, we went through and we analyzed what you want to consider when you are going to choose a microphone, because every microphone is different. And this is super important that you recognize that, because not one person's recommendation isn't always the microphone for you. And we ran down some considerations you have when you're choosing and using. Now, this was quite a few episodes before we have Bandrew Scott. So if we were to amend that right now, we would say check out the Podcastage YouTube channel, because that's going to be a huge recommendation we've got.
Indeed. And there are things afoot within Better Podcasting to continue that as well, but definitely go check out Bandrew Scott's Podcastage YouTube channel. Okay. Our number 1 most downloaded episode by our listeners in the past year, from May 1st, 2016 to April 30th, 2017, is episode 65, Self-Hosting Your Podcast, RSS, and Media.
Oh, and this one, it wasn't even a contest. Like, honestly, it wasn't even close to the rest of the episodes. This one is miles ahead, and for good reason, because honestly, I kicked up a little dirt with this episode, and I pushed some buttons, and I knew I was pushing some buttons when I did it, but it was not for the purpose of pushing buttons. It was for talking about something that the industry has long started to ignore because a lot of the vocal voices just don't believe in it. And there are lots of good success stories with self-hosting your podcast. And so we wanted to run down the pros and the cons. We did both. And there were a lot of cons. I'm a self-hoster. I'm the first to admit self-hosting is not for everybody. It is a challenge. And that's what we did. And again, this wasn't even close. And we still continue to get lots of traffic to this. And we encourage you, if you are considering it, listen to this episode, because I'll say it again. I am a self-hoster, and I do not recommend self-hosting to everybody.
No, I couldn't do what I do and self-host at the same time. Sorry, it's not happening. So that's why I use Libsyn. But self-hosting does present to you a lot of options, especially if you're monetizing. So I'm not going to discount it at all. If you want to own your feed, if you want to own your show, if you want to make money off your show, self-hosting, it's probably your best bet for the long term. I know that I will always love Libsyn, and I'll probably host my media files on Libsyn, but I will contain my brand on a website if I ever do that route. So go check it out, episode 65. A lot of you did, by almost double of any other episode in that past year. So that is great. And thank you, everybody, for all of your downloads. We really appreciate it. And these are just the top 10 shows that you have voted for in your downloads. Now, there were a few shows that both Steven and I liked that weren't on this list, and we just want to give them honorable mentions because they were outside of the top 10. My first one that I want to talk about is episode 71, Building a Podcast Checklist. If you want to make sure you're not forgetting anything, building that checklist and then using that checklist, probably a good idea if you want to go check that out. It's episode 71 of How I Do It.
My first one that I've got here is episode 40, and as a hobby podcaster, this should be much higher. It is Keeping the Fun Alive, the co-host edition. We did a certain couple episodes on how to keep the fun alive on the show because we've talked about it. Podcasting is hard work and it is your hobby, and we wanted to break down some ways that you can keep the fun in your show. And this is where we talked about keeping fun with your co-host. So this one was a lot of fun for us, but it really was. And so check that out. That's episode 40. Now, that's not actually why I picked it. Why did I for sure pick it? Was because it had the 6-way mic shootout in it. Now, I did a 6-way mic shootout, and I did a blind test, and this is where I did it. And when we ran a poll for several months, and it was the 6 microphones that I've commonly referenced. I'll let you check that out. I won't list them all here, but that is why I like this episode. The rest of the subject matter was a lot of fun too, but honestly, the 6-way shootout was why I picked it.
That 6-way shootout was fun, and it had me in fits for like about a month. And if you want to check out how I reacted to that, go check that out. Episode 40. The other episode that I just wanted to make sure that we hit in this list was episode 27, Backups and Outages. I'm looking towards you for your safety and your security of your podcast, just to make sure that you can keep things running. So backups and protecting yourself against outages, very important in this digital age, in the security age. And go ahead, check that out. That's episode 27.
Now, here's where I give SP a little bit of credit, because this was actually my number one pick that I was going to put on my list, but he already had it on his list. Absolutely, the backups and outage. He had that on his list, and so I was like, okay, I'll go with another one. But SP, it's a good pick.
Well, thank you. I feel like I've robbed you of something. I told you in the show notes. I told you if you want to take it. I'll take another one.
But this way, I got to be selfish and essentially have 3. So there you go.
There you go. And Steven always thinking about himself.
Yeah. And the last one that we have was one that was tough for SP and I to do. In fact, I think that we had a couple of soda pops, if you know what I mean, before we did it, because it was. We talked about condenser microphones. We decided to put the caution to the wind, the advice that we often give everybody, and we decided to tackle head on if you are going to use a condenser, because basically the world has frozen over and there is no other microphones available, and you're going to use a condenser microphone. What should you do? Now, okay, I'm kind of joking on that because there are absolutely scenarios and right cases that people can use condensers fine. And we just say that because for the average hobby podcaster, you don't have the environment. So that's why we like to make it sound extreme. And so that's what we did in episode 47 was we talked about if you're going to use a condenser, how could you best use it? And it was tough for us to do, but we thought that it was worthwhile because there are people who are with a condenser and they're trying to make the best of it.
Indeed, that was a tough episode for me. I will just state that again because I've seen so many people fail with condensers or have trouble with condensers that it's just not worth it in general for us to recommend it to a hobbyist. But hey, as Steven said, maybe it's the only thing you got or the only thing that actually fits your use case. So make sure you take those considerations into effect when you are using it. So that is our top 10 and then 2 other picks each. So I guess top 14 episodes as chosen by our listener and us.
And if you want to check these out, all you got to do is betterpodcasting.com/the number. So for example, 65 is betterpodcasting.com/65. That'll take you right to the episode. So that's how you can check it out. But let's go ahead and move into a super quick download.
Welcome to this week's Better Podcasting Download.
Sometimes in podcasting, people just flip switches and they just see if anybody notices.
Apparently, Spotify did one of those a couple of weeks ago. So Spotify, you always had to be associated with another gateway like Libsyn or I believe Spreaker could be a gateway into Spotify. And what Spotify is, for those that don't know, it's an online streaming radio hub, basically. And they've been very selective on the podcasts that they choose to incorporate into their streaming system. And those that I've heard that have found their way into Spotify don't exactly have a wealth of downloads coming from there either. So I think Spotify is not known as a podcast hub, distribution hub, and people just don't look for podcasts there. But some people do get downloads there if you want to increase your exposure. And if you happen to be that 1 in 100 shows that get selected in the Spotify lottery, go ahead and apply because now you don't have to be part of Libsyn or Spreaker or another gateway to get included in their system. They have an actual application available now.
I'm looking forward to seeing what the results of this is because, you talked about it, how it's been so closed that I'm very interested to see how open they have made this. Maybe it's something that they've just gone and on the front, they're now opening it and everything's going to be rejected. But I don't think we're going to know for about 3 months. I think because we're going to initially get that big onset of people who are loud and vocal and saying, I was rejected. Meanwhile, it's the people who are using a Blue Yeti across the room while they're in a coffee shop that has cars idling outside. Those people are going to be loud and upset. But I think that there might be in a couple of months, we start to see the success stories. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I'd have to hear the success stories in order to advocate for this. I have applied on several of my shows. Obviously, none of my shows are on Spotify right now. Several of my shows are on iHeartRadio, though. And that has actually been a lot of downloads percentage-wise, somewhere between 10 and 20% per show over on iHeartRadio. So I think that is more of a success than Spotify. And like Steven said, unless you got to show it to me and then I will go for it. But I won't say burn me, or scorn me, but they've rejected me and in my shows, which are not done with a Blue Yeti across from the library. So, okay, if my shows aren't what you want, they're not what you want. I'm not going to debate with you. There's nothing I can do to change your mind, but I have applied. I have been rejected or at least not included. From what I've heard, they still keep all the submissions there in some sort of database. And as they want different content, they'll pick those up. But I think, yes, again, show me the results. And once you've shown me the results, then I will make another determination. Before then, I'm just very cautious Realistic expectations we talked about a couple of months ago. I'm giving you realistic expectations for Spotify. First of all, they choose like 1 in 100. I don't know the exact stats, but 1 in 100 shows. And then the results from the downloads of the shows that actually get on there are not all that great from what I've heard. And nobody has argued with me in podcast circles about that.
No, and what I was getting at is my theory, if they're opening this up now, they're looking for more content. So in theory, I would think they'd be changing things a little bit. So just because you were rejected before, maybe it doesn't mean that if you were applying now, you might have gotten accepted. I don't know. We don't know. But I would think that if a company ends up opening up the application process, they are looking for more shows and they're probably relaxing. But that's just a random guess. You don't know. And we won't know for a couple of months. We won't know.
I do have a theory based on that, in that they think they have taken the golden nuggets from the places, the pools of which they are reaching into, of places like Spreaker and Libsyn, and they want that self-hosted show, or they want that show on Podbean that doesn't have a direct connect into Spotify. I don't know if they do or don't actually, or anywhere else that they might be able to pull in. They want to get that gem of a content outside of the pools that they already play in. That's what I think this is for.
Who knows? But know that they're open and that something might have changed or it might not have. We don't know.
Good luck.
Let's go ahead and move into our Better Pod Back. We got email from a loyal listener named Johnny Pennington. Now, Johnny, I got to give him credit. He often gives us really good advice and suggestions for the show. He and I email quite a bit, and I always appreciate when he emails because he does have some good suggestions. And sometimes things work, sometimes they don't work for the show. But I would rather have somebody suggesting it than sitting there saying, "Well, why don't they do this?" So, Johnny, thank you very much. And SP, go ahead.
Me. This is SP's rendition of Johnny Pennington's email. Hey guys, I hope all is well. I've noticed that the podcast forum seems a lot less utilized as of late. I believe that there is a huge amount of your audience that are still, quote, not, unquote, aware of it, nor of its usefulness. If you each week during your Better Podcasting episodes use a questions, shout out, or idea during your podcast that recognizes it from being from the podcast forum, like the segment, quote unquote, pod back, unquote, it should increase the awareness of it to your listener/viewers, thus increasing the participation on that site. I also believe that you should mention it during each podcast as an additional way of learning, not just one day a week as with Better Podcasting, but as a daily way to increase one's education of podcasting and to help others in the podcasting community. This is not self-promotion for Better Podcasting. This is promoting a tool for your Better Podcasting community. It is a great idea and tool for your listeners to use. I just believe it needs a little kick in the rear by some promotion to get it really up and running. Anywho, give it some thought. I'd like you guys to succeed in all you do. Yours truly, Johnny Pennington.
Johnny, thanks so much for this. And there's a couple of quick things I just want to touch on. But number one, yes, the podcast forum. The podcastforum.com is a forum where you can talk to fellow podcasters. And Johnny is one of the people in there, and he's starting a podcast and he's over there asking questions. So check that out. That's thepodcastforum.com. Really, what I wanted to say in regards to this was absolutely, we're actually going to start working that in a little bit more. What it boils down to right now is a lot of people are in the same situation that SP and I are, is it's summer and that there's not as much screen time as we find outside of summer. I've run podcast communities, I've run general communities, I've run forums for many years, and summer is hard. Summer is always a slowdown in all of these things. In fact, I would argue that I personally notice a slowdown on the Facebook groups as well, because people are out playing. They're not near their computer. They're out fixing cars. They're out doing projects in their yard. They're doing all of these things instead of being near the computer, which is why we're a little delayed with working this into the show, because we don't want to just waste everybody's time right now. And really, again, the summer is a hard time to get that community involvement everywhere.
It is. I find myself only going to the podcast forum about every other day. I won't say every day, 5 days a week. There's days that I just don't get in. And as Stephen alluded to, there's a lot going on. There's yard work to attain to. There's vacations to be had. There's fun time and off time with family. And there's just a lot. And as he mentioned, car repairs ongoing. Yes. 6 procedures. I'm on procedure 1, step 10 of 80. So that's where things stand right now for the car repair. We will keep that an ongoing count as this podcast goes on. But the podcast forum will be getting more promotion, and it will be more attended to by us in the future. It hasn't gone by the wayside by either of us, by the way. We've been responding to posts that have been put on there. So if you want to join the podcastforum.com and join that community, maybe you have something to say or a question yourself, go ahead and throw that in there. We would love to hear from you.
Absolutely. So check that out. That's thepodcastforum.com. And if you're in another community elsewhere, that's okay. We'll forgive you. But if it's a little bit quieter, it's probably because it's the summer. Again, I've been doing this community thing a long time. It is very common in the summer months. But that is the end of episode 88. We hope you enjoyed this shorter episode, and you're going to go now dig into the past and criticize us and talk all about how we've changed and we shouldn't be mentioning blab as you go back and you listen to those past episodes. But that is the end of the show. If you like what you heard, please give us a shout. It's podcast@betterpodcasting.com. So for episode 88 of Better Podcasting, I'm Stephen John Drew. I'm going to go listen to my top 10 episodes of my life.
And I'm SP saying thank you very much for downloading all our podcasts. I hope you have fun listening to all of them.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Better Podcasting. We want to hear from you. You can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. If you like the show, please consider giving us a 5-star review in iTunes. We encourage you to check out all of the other geeky podcasts available at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. This has been a Gonna Geek production. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.